think the virtues of a good master, the 12 virtues, the work by Brother Agathon, gives us an insight into the Lasallian schools 105 years after the first school in Reims. For this reason, we're able to judge how has this Lasallian heritage been passed on, because the most perceptive French historians, I think, see that de La Salle succeeded where his predecessors failed to establish good schools for the poor. And I think we need to ask the question, why did he succeed? And the historians say, well, because he created a movement. And I see Agathon's 12 virtues as a very interesting landmark in this kind of movement that was launched. Brother Agathon's trying to give us a profile of the ideal kind of teacher. He's an 18th century man, so he's very much into the neoclassical ideas of the period, which come very much through the Greeks and the Latins, that virtues, for example, can be acquired by practicing the thing often enough, by developing habits. So that these 12 virtues offer us a kind of profile of where a teacher begins and how he succeeds in becoming a better kind of teacher. Brother Agathon was born in 1731 and died in 1798. We know that he came into the brothers' congregation following his older brother. We don't know very much about where he was trained or how he was trained, but we find him as the author of a text on mathematics, a book on commerce, we'd call it today a book on bookkeeping, and we know that at one period of his life he taught the science of navigation to French naval officers in the brothers' school in Vannes. He was called to the general chapter of 1777, not because he was a delegate. There were only 30 delegates and he was not a very prominent person, but he was known to be clear-headed and a very good person at summarizing things. He came to the chapter as secretary and, I think to his great surprise, found himself elected superior general. He then endured the period of the French Revolution, appeared before the Assembly twice in Paris to defend the Institute, to try and save it, spent 18 months in prison, and eventually died in exile after the dispersion of the congregation in 1798. The Brother Agathon wrote the 12 Virtues of a Good Master as a circular letter to the brothers. He had it printed because he began the tradition of printing circulars rather than having them copied from community to community. Possibly he found there were certain errors creeping into these circulars. We don't know why, but he began a tradition which continues to the present day. The 12 Virtues came as the second circular of his period of office. The first one had been addressed to the brothers in terms of their religious duties, and he begins the second circular by saying there wouldn't be much point in talking about our religious duties unless we talked about the main reason why we exist as a brotherhood, as a congregation, namely for the Christian education of the poor. The listing of the virtues and the development comes nevertheless out of Lasallian writings. It shows somebody who's absorbed de La Salle's ideas, but is not simply repeating them in a literal way, but is able to adapt them. I think if we're looking today at a Lasallian heritage about teaching, I mean, is there a recognizable profile of a good Lasallian teacher? Then I think this work is a very good guide for us.